the Isle of Man General Election 2021 coverage on Manx Radio.
We're live tonight at Ginger Hall for Ayre and Michael. Ayre and Michael, the constituency, is the far north of the Isle of Man. It stretches along part of the west coast, includes Andres, Ballaugh, Bride, Derby, Lazaire, and Michael, and of course tonight Sulby. We're actually in River Meadowland. And tonight, the candidates will be with us. Tim Baker, Sosten Basugu, Alfred Cannon, Tim Johnston, Duncan Livingston, Paul Weatherall, and Madeleine Westall. Philip Corgill has chosen not to participate tonight. So, let's go first of all to the candidates. I want to go to Tim Johnston first of all. Tim Johnston, why do you want to be MHK for Ayre and Michael?
Lived in the constituency for 25 years, Andy. I think it's very important. I'm a farmer as well, and I'm president of the National Farmers Union. I think one of the great advantages of our system of having mainly independent MHKs is to make sure that all sectors are covered, and I want to make sure that food and farming and issues that affect the rural economy are covered.
Duncan Livingston.
Yes, I've decided to stand because I felt a sense of dismay and frustration at some of the lack of common sense ideas that the civil service seem to impose on us. Things like just not fixing the roads. I think I can help, and that's why I'm standing.
Paul Weatherall.
Well, I keep moaning and groaning about what goes on in government. I have lots of ideas myself about how it might be improved, so I thought I'd put my money where my mouth is.
Alfred Cannon.
I came into politics to make a difference, Andy. 10 years ago when I came in, there was a financial crisis going on. The island was facing a period of considerable austerity. Unemployment was increasing and heading up to sort of modern day highs. 10 years later on, we've restored a semblance of normality and credibility to our finances. We've got the lowest rates of unemployment for 20 years. And our economy has grown significantly over the last 5 years. There are a number of challenges ahead, and I want to continue making a difference.
Madeleine Westall.
I've decided to stand because I want to raise awareness of the challenges that we face in the north. I feel that sometimes we're forgotten about, and in particular, challenges about our housing and our young people, about refurbishment of local government housing, other issues such as the economy and bringing jobs to the area.
Okay, thank you. Tim Baker.
Yeah, 5 years ago I was a newcomer, had 25 years of business experience. I've now had 5 years in where I've shown what I can do and that I can operate in the political environment. I've got a track record where I've taken on the tough challenges, and there's so much more to be done. And I think it needs people who are prepared to step up, take some risks and make things happen.
Sosten Basugu.
Initially, I wanted to run in Africa as a candidate for president, but I found that because I'm established here and my family is here, I've decided to run for Tynwald instead. So I want to bring a new approach to political representation in the Isle of Man to help every single voter out there.
Okay, let's go to the candidates now, just to see what they represent and what they want to bring to. Let's talk about the north of the Isle of Man. First of all, Tim Johnston, obviously a farmer,
Yep.
Embedded in the farming community. How's the agricultural sector faring at the moment?
Challenging. I think it has been for many years. I think when you're in an industry that basically what you sell is sort of below the cost of production, generally, it's always going to be a challenge. I think looking ahead, COVID obviously has been a big issue. We're very concerned about what effects that would have on our markets. In some ways, actually, it's strengthened things. In the last 12 months, we have seen better prices for red meat, beef and lamb, and dairy. But always the challenges of farming on a small island, high input costs, some of the most expensive freight costs in the world to deal with, getting things on and off the island, small fields. These are all challenges that Manx farmers have to do to challenge with, and actually do, taking that into account, an amazing job.
Madeleine Westall, obviously you know a lot about teaching, you know a lot about young people. How do you think, last night we talked in Arbury Castle Town and Maloo, talking about bullying in school and the inability to suspend children. What's the atmosphere like in school?
I can't honestly comment on having a lot of experience of bullying in schools, and neither about whether students are suspended. I do feel, however, that the students have lost an awful lot of learning, and we should value each and every one of our children and ensure that not one of them is left behind because of COVID. And that means that we need to have a programme which gives that extra help to all the children, whatever they may have missed. In the north here, we have very poor connectivity for ultra-fast broadband is not due to reach us until nearly 2025, and that means it's been very difficult for some children to stay up with their lessons. So that's my recent take.
What would you do if you were in Keys? How would you address the idea of regional and rural connectivity?
We need to get broadband into every secondary school child's house, irrespective of parental income, because today it's technology, today it's global, it's giving them a global perspective, and it's allowing them to flourish and achieve their full potential. Our students today can't do that if they don't have access.
Tim Wetherall, as far as education goes, how is education in the north of the Isle of Man, in this region?
I think the primary schools do a great job for the people living in our villages. I'd like to see them supported in the future and sustainable. And most of our secondary school pupils go to either Ramsey Grammar School or QE2 from Kirk Michael area particularly. And I think we need to strengthen the college, especially to allow more facilities for people to retrain and gain apprenticeships in green technology that we'll all be requiring over the next 5 to 10 years.
Duncan Livingston, tell us about that road scheme. Did you get that road scheme changed?
I did, yes. There was going to be 10 speed bumps on the main road through Kirk Michael, which I thought was complete overkill. It wasn't what the people of Kirk Michael wanted. They wanted the pavements fixing. Instead, we've got a scheme which is better than it was, but is still far more than I thought was required. Obviously, the new crossing has been the subject of much debate. I just think we need to fix the potholes, make things fit for purpose.
And also, you come from, you were a policeman for how long?
I did 31.5 years in the police.
In the roads unit as well?
For 20 years I was a collision investigator, okay. and I was also the advanced driving instructor.
What do you think of the speed limit through Kirk Michael now?
30 I think is acceptable and is reasonable. There is an issue I know sometimes with every speed limit that they're not enforced as much as they should be, and that's not any sort of reflection on the police. There's 168 hours in a week. Even if they worked on every single speed limit for an hour a day, we've still got an awful lot of time where speed limits are not enforced.
Alfred Cannon?
Well, Kirk Michael needed regeneration work, and it's got regeneration work. Those pavements are being done at the moment. They're being widened in certain areas. The school has got a new crossing going into it. We're looking at enhancing road safety, but we're also looking at methods to try and slow the traffic down through Kirk Michael. So this is positive news for Kirk Michael.
Okay, Tim Baker. Well, this is your bag.
Absolutely. And 5 years ago, a promise was made to the people of Kirk Michael that a scheme will be done. We're now doing it. Clearly, you can't keep everybody happy all the time. The reference that Duncan Livingston's made, therefore, to speed bumps was one of the options that was put forward. There was an extensive period of engagement and consultation where all the potential options were put on the table, and the final scheme reflected the best mix of the feedback that was received. It won't keep everybody happy, but it's positive and it's getting things done.
Okay, Sosten?
Yes, I think it's important because in the campaign trail I've come across a lot of constituents mentioning the fact that there's a lot of people not respecting the speed limit, and it's very dangerous for people crossing the road. So I will advise that we look at it very carefully, and that the authority intervene in order to help the constituents.
Tell me how you think the Isle of Man should address climate change.
I think climate change is a big topic, environmentally speaking, and we should look at different priorities. We have to look at air pollution. We also look at the water, the pollution of the water. I'm mentioning the air pollution. I will say that because we have a lot of cars on the roads, we should make sure that we don't I think damage the fact that people want to move towards clean air, but in the fact that the projects that are being enacted by the government are contrary, I think making the constituents very upset because they are taking the money out of the people.
You want trains on the Isle of Man. You want trains, don't you? You want a rail system.
Yeah, it's important because I want what we call an integrated transportation system here on the Isle of Man. That means that will help reduce our carbon print in the Isle of Man, and also have fewer cars on the roads, and use the buses as well as the train.
Is this new trains, new lines?
Normally we used to have in the past some train working even towards Michael by the fire station. If we can try to think about all those schemes before, I can certainly study that scheme and come up with an answer that will satisfy everybody.
Madeline Westall, how do we address climate change then?
I think we've got to set firm targets, which the government hasn't done so far, and make all efforts to meet those targets. In particular, looking at removing diesel and petrol cars gradually from our roads, perhaps just by not allowing the registration of new petrol or diesel cars, and incentivising people to switch to electric or hydrogen vehicles.
Paul Weatherall?
Yeah, I think government has to help people adjust to climate change, but government doesn't have to do everything. We've got to bring in the private sector to work with us, and everyone has a responsibility for tackling climate change.
Has this come up on the doorstep?
Pardon?
Has this come up on the doorstep?
Yeah, it comes up on the doorstep. It's not the biggest priority of people on the doorstep. I think first, affordable housing is the biggest priority that's been brought up.
We'll come to that, don't worry.
Yeah, but on climate change, I agree with Madeline that we need to set targets. I think the government needs to work with the UK government and commission a second interconnector for electricity. I think the proposed scheme for grants to assist people in converting their homes to away from fossil fuels that's coming in October isn't strong enough. So I think we need to review that and bring in a loan scheme as well as a grant scheme.
Okay, Duncan Livingston?
I think that the government needs to lead by example. They did a fabulous job in St John's with the building there, which is very environmentally friendly, and yet at the moment we've got a new test centre getting built, and there's no ground source heat pumps in there, there's no solar panels in there, there's nothing which is recognised as being environmentally friendly being put into the new test centre.
Are you aware of any consultation when it was being planned?
I'm not aware of any. I don't know what exactly is going on with that.
Tim Johnson?
What I'm concerned about is a sort of anti-car that's sort of coming into government now. Living in a rural constituency like Ayre and Michael, a car is a lifeline for a lot of people, small businesses as well, very important. It doesn't matter how good, and it's not great, public transport is. And great ideas about rail, huge costs. Let's not get into cuckoo land, let's stick to reality. People need transport in the north of the island to move around, and what I don't want through this scheme and through the changes is for car drivers to be demonised, and that does concern me. It's all very well talking about electric cars, they're incredibly expensive, so if you can afford it, fine. But the irony at the moment is they're using fossil fuel powered electricity to charge them up, and they're not paying any road tax.
What's going to happen to combines and tractors? What will they run on?
Good question. I mean, there's absolutely no way that battery power can be used in situations like that. Obviously, what we're looking at, what we're hoping for is developments, for example, within hydrogen and those sort of fuels, potentially using existing infrastructure, existing sort of combustion engines. But these are the big issues that we have to think about, because what we also got to be careful of is the costs involved, and that's one of the other big issues of all of this. It's right that the Isle of Man sets its targets, and there is the idea that there are targets, there is a climate bill in place, this idea that the government isn't making plans, there are plans there. The key thing is that we have a fair transition. We're taking everybody with us on that journey, because there's a huge amount of cost involved in all of this, and that's my concern. It's just going to put a huge amount of pressure on business and taxpayers.
Tim Baker?
Yeah, it's a really important journey. The destination of net zero by 2050 has been set. It's really important that we take a very considered approach to what we're doing. There's already processes underway in government. All the key drivers of our carbon emissions are being evaluated and plans being developed around the buildings, around transport and around our power generation. These are fundamental issues. If we get them wrong, we've got potentially will undermine the whole. We cannot afford to be back in Betamax in a VHS world, and we've only got one chance to get this.
Alfred Cannon.
I think there's a number of views around the climate change. I think first of all, as an island, we need to recognise that this is now an international programme and that we need to be with it and we need to be at the forefront of it, otherwise we will fall behind. Secondly, we also need to recognise it brings with it a number of opportunities for better housing, potential economic opportunities for a better, cleaner environment. There's a couple of things that we really do need to think about. First of all is the plan, and we need to make sure that we do have a proper roadmap and plan towards leading us towards net zero, and something that the public can understand where the money is being spent and what the benefits are to society from spending that money. We need to make sure that that plan is properly costed and transparently so that it does not impact adversely on household budgets. It's pointless getting to the end of this road only to find that the cost of energy supply is so high that no one wants to stay on the island. And also we want to be very careful, and this means getting the right advice and the right people on the Climate Change Transformation Board, that we don't end up chasing shadows and end up spending millions of pounds only to find we're not getting to the end benefit, or that technology has moved on so quickly that we're already behind.
Will we have offshore or onshore wind power?
Well, I think that's one of the critical things, working out what the renewable energy supply will be. There's obviously an opportunity here for the island to increase its energy security. There may be an opportunity here, Andy, for our supply to be onshore and for us to potentially look at offshore opportunities to export electricity to offset some of the costs that might be incurred from any onshore wind farms. But ultimately, Andy, this is the critical point. The cost is potentially substantial. We need to work that out carefully. We need to work particularly with the private sector, and we need to make sure that the end outcome when it comes to utility bills is appropriate and it's right for our island.
We're live at the Ginger Hall in Sulby tonight for Ayre and Michael 2021 general election. Is 3 weeks today. In 3 weeks today, Vivian, will they be closed? Will the polls be closed? It won't be closed, will they? 10 o'clock, isn't it, Vivian? 8 o'clock, that's it. So, well, everybody's going to be sweating in 3 weeks' time and 45 minutes. We're live tonight. So, Ginger Hall, Sosten Basuku, Tim Baker, Alfred Cannon, Tim Johnson, Duncan Livingston, Paul Weatherall, Madeleine Westall. Philip Corkill is a candidate, but he's chosen not to participate tonight. I want to go back to Mr. Cannon, because affordable housing, time and time again, runs through everything that people want to know about. Our young people getting onto the property ladder, the dispiriting nature of private landlords sucking the life out and getting returns from the housing that they rent out. What do you think? I mean, how big is this an issue for people around the Isle of Man? Well,
it has come into a major focus post-COVID, if that's the right word, post the immediate COVID emergency. The housing market has somewhat exploded. Let me take you back 5 years, Andy. We had a census which demonstrated that 500 people had left the island. Our house prices were stagnating. There were for sale signs all over the island. Fast forward 4 years, we've got 1,250 more economically active people paying income tax. We've got 600 more businesses paying ITIP and national insurance. We've driven the economy forward with the right balance of financial measures in the budgets, and we have somewhat of a success story on our hands, but now we have created this housing bubble, and it is a real problem. The next government is going to have to deal with this as a matter of urgency. There are a number of policies that we could bring in and look at, whether we start to restrict the number of house purchasers or the type of individuals who can make house purchases, whether we look at freeing up government land to do some more affordable building. There's lots of policies that can be brought in.
All right, Madeleine Westall.
I think there's a real need for a capital development programme for more local authority housing, so that for single people, for young families and for older people who wish to who wish to downsize, they can rent or rent to buy local authority houses, and that would take the heat out of the private rental market, which is just appalling.
Do you think there's a sense of grievance with young people not being able to get on the ladder, with reaching for something that they simply can't get to?
I think grievance is one word. I think we're also seeing the impacts of it in our population dynamics, in that we have so few people now returning to the island in the 20 to 29 and 30 age bracket. And those that do remain here are not having any children. Our birth rate has declined by 35%, and that is testament to the situation with the housing market. It is totally unsustainable.
Tim Baker.
Yeah, suitable, affordable and accessible housing is fundamental for the island's economic future, both to keep our young people on the island and to attract the key workers that we need for our education, health and police services in particular. My first suggestion would be that we need to create a Minister for Housing, because there isn't one at the moment. It's fragmented. As DUI Minister, I'm responsible for social housing, but housing generally has no single focal point. There's nobody looking at policy.
Is this coming up on the doorstep for you?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a big issue. I mean, everybody wants somewhere decent to live, and to advance in their life aspirations, they need a suitable home, whether it's rented or purchased. And at the moment, we've got northwest wage levels and southeast house price in the island. It doesn't compute.
Sosten?
Yeah, there are so many young people living in parental homes at the moment, and I think that it's not acceptable with the Isle of Man that rich and not being able to support the younger generation. It's appalling. So what I would suggest that the government step in, even some investors, to build some 1-2 bedrooms flat or apartments, housing stock, so that our young people can live and give the parents some breathing space as well, because they want to have that time, and also young people want to develop and have a family of their own.
Okay, Tim Johnson.
Major issue, probably the biggest issue I've come across on the doorstep. A lot of people are incredibly worried about their kids, their grandkids, wanting to come back to the island. You know, the bigger picture is housing to me is part of the big picture of the future plan for the island and our economy. If we don't have the young people here, we can't attract them here, we've got serious problems for the future. Government's got to tackle, for example, the power that the big developers have got on the island. They've just got carte blanche to do what they want, and they just do the absolute minimum requirement of affordable homes in these new projects. I think that's a real issue. Government do not stand up to these large developers, and I think that's a real problem.
Duncan Livingston?
Yes, it's definitely. They are moving across, and we are losing talent, which we need on the island if the island is going to continue to flourish and grow.
So if you were an MHK, if you become an MHK, is that something that you'd see as a priority?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to see some form of residency act, and what I've suggested a few times is I think for any new greenfield developments, we should look at legislating rent caps and price caps on the price of new houses.
Paul Weatherall?
Yeah, 5 years ago, the first-time buyer scheme was inadequate, and now it's a joke. And there are proposals to improve it, and I think the next administration need to fully scrutinise what those proposals are and make sure they are adequate for the future.
I mean, you represent Liberal Vannin. Is Liberal Vannin for more housing, sustained housing?
More sustained housing for both purchase and rent, but on Andreas Airfield area, Derby, but looking at
anything from 30, 40 to even in some instances 80 or 90% more expensive than they were previously. And these sorts of elements have to be borne into consideration.
Okay, I need to move on. Just, by the way, can I just ask everyone in the room, will you please turn your mobile phone off? Somebody's mobile phone is playing up with our system at the moment. And if you're listening at home, if all they can, just check your mobile phones, because somebody's got a particularly strong mobile phone signal that's interfering with us. It's 25.
Could I just come in there, though, please, Andy? I think government's been talking about having a housing strategy for the island for decades, and we need to actually get to grips with that, and the next administration needs to get a housing strategy that everyone can focus on with targets and move forward.
I think, Andy, we also need to find out from the census how many of the units, houses and flats and apartments are empty, because we may be building homes which don't actually have anybody in them. They're just assets to be sold in 3 or 5 years' time.
There are some houses in this constituency that are only occupied for the minimum number of weeks per year. What would you do about those?
Potentially you can take them back into ownership. Potentially
More tax?
It's one way of going about it. But the other thing is to look at the reasons why our young people don't want to return to the island when they've finished university. And that is very much because they're looking for other things at that time in their lives. If we want to attract our key workers back to the island, whether they're teachers or nurses, doctors, GPs, then we have to give them an assured home when they arrive here. And not just for 1 year. We have to be able to say, if you bring your family here and take up this key role, there will be a home for you. You can rent it to start with, you can rent it and then buy it.
Okay.
But there has to be affordable housing for key workers.
Right, it's a couple of minutes before we open things up to the audience here in the Ginger Hall, so I just want to go very quickly, 30 seconds to each candidate. I want to talk about crime. I'm going to start with the ex-policeman, Duncan Livingston. How is crime in the north of the Isle of Man?
I think if you go to any of the commissioners' meetings, crime is relatively low. The probably overriding one which stands out is people are concerned about drugs. If you go to a commissioners' meeting, the things that people seem to be concerned about are dog poo and speeding. If that's what people are concerned about, that speaks to the quality of life being good and
antisocial behaviour.
Low. Yes, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as it is in the bigger areas. I know one can have had a particularly bad problem with the antisocial behaviour.
Tim Johnson.
I would like to see the shift changes at the prison, that the prison officers slow down a bit on the way home. I think you know, a lot of concern, and it's, you know, no joke. I mean, the speed that we're seeing on vehicles on the roads in the north of the island, and people will tell you it's been markedly changed since the
no agricultural crime.
But we don't see a great deal of that. I mean, that is a big issue in other places.
Oh, it's absolutely. A blight in England, obviously, with vehicles being stolen and cattle being rustled, but completely nothing on the Isle of Man?
Very little indeed of that, thankfully.
Paul Weatherall.
Well, I think the issue there with the rustling that goes on in parts of rural England is the difficulty people would have is getting the animals off the island if they did.
Notice it on the Ben McCree.
I think so, yeah. I think there's crime, obviously, in a rural area with sheep worrying, which it obviously affects farmers and everyone else.
Okay, Alfred Cannon.
I mean, crime, active sort of visible crime levels are thankfully very, very low. But when you speak to the police, there is a lot of sort of underground drugs problem across the island, really. So you cannot be complacent. In 2018, we did actually give £2 million more to the police to increase the community policing capacity. I'd like to see a more visible presence up in the north. That'll be one of the things that I'll be looking to achieve if I get back in.
Madeline Westall.
I would like to see a combined effort on mental health issues, especially for those that lead on then to crime, whether it's some form of social abuse or occurring, and that needs to be the mental health team with the GPs and with the police all working together, which I believe is going to happen in the north.
Tim Baker.
Yeah, the big issue clearly is drugs coming from across the county lines. We need to be strong at our borders. The police need to be very much on top of that. In terms of locally, it's about neighbourhood policing, and we just need more police. The police are hugely overstretched. There are not enough policemen, and there needs to be more investment in that.
Sostin.
To my knowledge, the crime rate is low as per the rest of the island, but we must continue to maintain a zero tolerance policy.
I just wanted to show Ayre and Michael off to the rest of the island, because they'll be very jealous in other parts of the Isle of Man. Right, let's get some questions from the audience then. Who have we got? Ben, and your name, sir, is?
Julian Tier,
Julian, what's your question?
the Sir Parish Commissioner. My question is, two of these gentlemen are ladies, and lady is going to be elected to represent the constituency of Ayre and Michael. It's by far the biggest constituency in the Isle of Man in terms of area, and it has the biggest coastline. Coastal erosion is a problem. Now, to do something about it, I don't think the answer is in major civil engineering works. I think the answer to this problem is environmental. You want people qualified in environmental issues to see about resetting grass and scrub or whatever on the cliffs.
Okay, thanks,
Julian.
so
what do you intend to do about it?
Paul Weatherall.
I think I'd take engineering advice. I think it is an engineering problem, and an engineering solution is required in terms of coastal erosion in the Kirkmichael area especially.
Duncan?
I think I would support the idea of looking at natural solutions as well, but we are losing coast, and places like Kirkmichael, people want their houses to be protected.
Tim Johnson, can we turn back nature?
No, you can't. But you can help manage the situation. You can help mitigate. And I think Julian's right. I think it's also talking to the people in the area and listening. And I think that doesn't happen. People who know that the land, the lay of the land, they know where the water goes, they know where the culverts go. These things matter as well, because it's not just about coastal erosion. It's actually the drainage is causing big problems as well. I know there's funding being put in place, talked about for flood defences for the island as a whole. And I would want and urge that is directed at places like Kirkmichael, where there are serious issues.
Tim Baker.
Yeah, it's already in hand in terms of protecting the key risk area. Of
Are things
Kirkmichael
getting
coast.
worse? How much worse are they getting in the?
Kirkmichael is suffering quite significantly in terms of annual loss of land, and because of that, we've accelerated the priority of Kirkmichael. It's now been elevated into the high priority areas along with other parts of the island. There's some rock revetment schemes, detailed design that was funded in the last budget. That's underway at the moment, and we're committed to.
Madeline Westall.
I was just going to say the same. Rock revetment schemes are going to be the key way, at least to
What's a rock
avoid.
what is that?
Putting large boulders down.
Big boulders.
Because it takes out the energy.
It doesn't look very nice, does it?
It saves the land.
Right,
It slows the rate of erosion, and
Right.
yeah, rock revetment scheme just to take out the pounding of the waves.
Alfred
the
Cannon.
energy.
Well, the fact is this has been going on for hundreds of years, and if you measure it consistently across that period, particularly around the critical point, Kirkmichael, where millions of pounds and assets of people's property is at threat at the moment, you'll find that rate of increase of erosion is roughly about a metre a year. So it is significant, it is serious, and I'm afraid the only solution at the moment available for that type of protection is a hard engineered one. That's why we've got the design and drawings underway, and very much trusting that will
Have
form
you
a
had letters
fundamental
about
part
this?
of the next capital programme.
You had letters about this? Have you had constituents come
Of
to
course,
you?
we've been working on this for decades, because you can see the damage that has been done, which does vary, albeit from winter to winter, but consistently over time it's averaging at about a metre a year, and it's getting closer and closer to significant habitation.
Okay, Sostin Basugu.
Yeah, I believe that the erosion of the coast is a very serious issue, but it must not be done at the expense of the constituent real needs. There has to be a balance especially cost-wise.
Okay, another question, please. We've got your name, sir,
is Peter Lillywhite.
Okay, and your question.
There are two things, well, maybe three, that I would like to ask. One is, we love the Isle of Man, my wife and I, and we've been here for 9 years. We've built a nature reserve, but I believe that the legal system is broken, and nobody's mentioned that.
What's your question, sir?
I want to ask people what they think about the adequacy of the legal system.
Okay, and
on the
briefly,
element.
what are your other two questions? You said there were three.
One is the building industry, and the other is not relevant maybe to Isle of Man, but I believe population control is the biggest problem on the planet.
Okay, let's go to the legal system. Tim Johnston, you don't have to give a comprehensive answer.
You're not going to get one, I'm afraid. No.
Do you see any glaring inconsistencies or inadequacies in the legal system?
Well, I'm not sitting here now. I can't answer that. But what I would say is, obviously, if elected, I'd want to understand, have conversations with constituents. If there are issues, try and understand it, and try and find out what the issues are.
Duncan Livingston.
I think everybody has heard stories of legal inequalities. It's not just here, it's across the world. We are luckier than lots of places. I'm sure it could be improved. I would like to be in a position where I could try and improve.
You don't have to comment on this, but is the Isle of Man better served by a Manx or an off-island chief constable?
Personally, I think off-island is better.
Okay, Paul Wetherall, the legal system.
Right, I think one of the issues is the cost of getting access to legal aid. So I think that's one of the major factors in fairness in justice on the island.
Alfred Cannon?
There's significant room for improvement. There's just been quite a lengthy report undertaken by Jane Paul Wilson, member of the Legislative Council. But the critical factor and one of the big issues here is when things go wrong, when people are not getting proper legal service or are being ill-advised, there is very little recourse, independent recourse, to have a proper judgment made to resolve that and to take a proper view as to whether or not advocates have given proper advice in line with their professional standards. And that's a glaring problem, and it continues to be a problem, and it needs resolution.
Sosten?
The legal system, especially with regards to crime, I believe it must be dealt with fairly. I think that if I'm elected, I will advocate the fact that it's important that the sentencing fits the crime.
In what way?
That means, for example, if I take an example, somebody who steals something in the shop, or somebody who has maybe raped a woman, somebody may be sentenced for maybe, we shall say, a few months, and then is out, while the other one is sentenced for maybe 5 years. So they has to be adequately assessed.
Tim Baker?
Yeah, I mean, at high level, fundamental, you've got to have a good justice system on an island, otherwise confidence in the island as jurisdiction is completely undermined. Without going into detail of Mr. Lillywhite's particular situation, there needs to be mechanisms for redress for him, and there's the Justice Select Committee, which is now part of the scrutiny set up of Tynwald, and very much would encourage that route for the particular issue.
Adeline Westall.
I think legal aid has to be made available to everybody, and I think it's been fairly stagnant for the last decade in terms of...
Well, the advocates would agree with you.
Yeah, they haven't had an increase either for their legal aid, for giving legal aid. But it's more of the fact that people should be able to access legal aid if they're entitled to it. May I also say that in terms of nature reserves, we need a strengthening of designation in terms of SSSIs, sites of special scientific interest, so that places like Derby Airfield cannot be inadvertently built over, and we lose species which we know are in decline. We have to protect habitats on our biosphere.
Okay, our next question. Your name is?
Andrew Roberts.
And your question?
Bearing in mind that the last person to win the MLC's election in Tynwald stated after their election, about 2 days before we went into lockdown, that their priority was some kind of media investment. How do you feel about the way we appoint and elect or carry on with MLCs?
Tim Baker.
Well, we've changed it quite significantly in the last 5 years, and I think there's still a fair degree of dissatisfaction with what we've got. We've now got MLCs now standing for keys, which is quite a turnaround.
Whilst remaining MLCs.
Whilst remaining MLCs. I mean, that's obviously, they haven't done anything wrong there, but it doesn't quite feel right to me.
You feel uneasy about that?
Yeah, I do. I think because if they don't get re-elected, they're then just going to go back in as an MLC and carry on as if nothing had happened. Whereas other MLCs have stood down to fight the constituency, and I think that was the right thing to be done. I think we can keep on talking about the structure of MLCs and how many MHKs there should be, etc., etc. But for me, it's about what's going to deliver the best outcomes for the people of this island.
Alfred Cannon.
Yeah, there's been a significant blurring of the lines of what the role of the MLCs actually are, which is to provide scrutiny when it comes to legislation. And that distinction has been significantly blurred as they've continued to persist in wanting to carry on forming and shaping policy without the public mandate to do so. The issue really revolves around, do you need 9 full-time members of the Legislative Council? Lord Lisvane suggested that was pared down and that the individuals went in on a day rate to scrutinise legislation. That is my preferred stance. That's where the position should be, and the full-time politics and policy should be left to the members of the House of Keys.
Paul Wetherall.
Yeah, I think we need to review the need for the Legislative Council in the first place.
In principle, we need a LegCo there, don't we?
We need to review whether we need it, and if we do need it, then we need to review its purpose. But if we do have legislative councillors, they should definitely be directly elected by the public.
Duncan.
Yes, I would say the same as Paul. I think it should be election by the public to the MLCs. I also think there are too many MHKs and too many MLCs, and I would support a reduction. I know it's turkeys voting for Christmas, and I might be a lone voice, but I definitely think that we should be looking to reduce the
number. Have you heard that from constituents, from voters?
I've had conversations with people previously and on the doorstep about it, yes, and people know my views.
Tim Johnson.
I think the key is their job description, which is scrutiny, and that's all it should be. And as long as that's in place, I don't think they should be elected. I think if they're doing that job, that's fine. And the key thing here is that primacy is the keys, and that's always the case. The keys will always have the final say, and that is the right way around. That's the democratic way, and as long as that stays, that's the right structure.
Sosten Basugu.
In my view, there must be a level of accountability, but the bottom line is the voice of the people, the voice of the constituent must be heard.
Tim Baker, we're back with you again. Next question. And your name is?
Katrina Livingstone.
And your question?
I'd like to know people's position on how effective current sentencing is for drug abuse crimes and legalization of cannabis.
Okay, when you say drug abuse crimes, people...
Well, people are arrested for drugs and they go to prison and they come out and they do drugs again and they go back to prison, and it seems like an awful waste of time. Do they have any ideas for a more effective way of tackling, especially with young people whose lives are wasted?
Okay, well, we'll be here all night doing this, but try and keep it brief, Tim Baker.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue that's facing us. I would be very much guided by the views of the Chief of Police, Chief Constable, and also in terms of the other aspects of Ms Livingston's question around the public health aspects. But we need to protect the Isle of Man, and we need to make sure that we are not opening ourselves up in Pandora's box. But what we've got at the moment is not working.
Madeline, people will be listening to us around the world, live, all over the world, and they think, the Isle of Man, drugs, it just doesn't sit right. Have we got this far? And what's your answer to the question?
Education, education, and more education. Simply get the young ones. Don't hold back. Tell them exactly what drugs do to them, and I include in that legal drugs such as alcohol, and just let them be educated. Those that do take the wrong path tend to be young adults, and they will, because they're at the risk-taking time of life. And you're quite right, sending them to prison is often counterproductive, but it's not counterproductive to help them get back on the right track. And
Alfred Cannon.
Community.
Well, I think rehabilitation is the key here, particularly for first-time offenders who are going to prison. I think we've lost a lot of potentially of the ethos that we used to have with prisoners in terms of giving them opportunities. I know within the prison people are being given educational opportunities, but it used to be the case that prisoners were brought out, were given jobs to do around the island. Those types of work schemes where they were and received a very small income would help in the rehabilitation. And I think we need to be less circumspect about that and look to be a bit more positive in terms of allowing people to undertake that kind of rehabilitation work, because I think it'll have a positive impact on them at that early stage, and to try and prevent reoffending.
Where do you stand on the legalisation of cannabis?
I think the government is looking at the moment in terms of the medicinal cannabis. We've now got the legislation in place. We've got the GSC looking at the regulations around it. I'm very hopeful to see a diversification, industrial diversification, which might also present opportunities for some farmland, or certainly some farm and industrial areas, to carefully and in a controlled way grow the medicinal cannabis. And I think we should take it one step at a time. I think we should get that project underway.
Tim Johnson.
I think there's a danger of making sure that we separate rehabilitation, which is really important. Just because we're maybe failing our children in prison doesn't mean we should legalise cannabis. I think it's a huge step. I agree with the idea that we've got new legislation in on cannabis oil export as an industry, and that's very positive. As Alf said, we're talking about looking at medicinal cannabis, and that's again a positive thing. But to go from that to suddenly say well, let's just illegalise all of it.
Yes.
That is not something I would.
What about the split between medicinal and recreational?
Well, as I say, having proper legislation in place for medicinal cannabis, understanding that, having that conversation, I think that's something I would support. But going from that to fully legalising is to me too big a step without having a much bigger consultation about what the impacts of that would be on society as a
Duncan
whole.
Livingston.
I support legalising cannabis.
Medicinal or recreational?
Recreational and medicinal. I also think that we should
You'd be happy for people to spliff up.
I think that we should also be decriminalising all drug use for users.
Yeah.
I think what we should be doing, though, is by doing that, we can make revenue from it. We can grow a quality product so that we know that the product that people are using is not cut with PCP or something else. And also, it needs to be treated as a welfare issue.
As a traffic officer, how would you feel about people driving around the island basically under the influence of potentially hard drugs?
There are tests out, and the legalising alcohol is legal. People drink and drive. It's not the fact that alcohol is legal is why people drink and drive.
That's okay. And Paul Wetherall.
Yeah, well, the abuse of drugs and alcohol is a mental health issue, I think. I think we should be reviewing the Misuse of Drugs Act 1990 over the next administration. Go out to public consultation, and like Duncan, I support legalising cannabis. I'm not sure I'd go as far as decriminalising all drugs, but Portugal has, and Oregon in the United States have. Jurisdictions all around the world are changing their views. The war on drugs has failed. I think we need to move with the times and get to grips with it.
Yeah, prison is not necessarily the answer. So I will push for a program, a scheme, to try to integrate our young people into our society, and then get the social workers to support and help them.
Okay, and Beth, it's Vivian Quain. Hello, Vivian.
Hello.
What's your question?
We've got all these large developments around the island. You were talking before about heat and electricity and everything. Why is there not some way of saying they should either have solar panels or underground heating when they're building the estates?
Paul Wetherall.
I didn't quite catch the question, but I think it's referring to solar panels.
If we're going to build new houses, why don't we make them eco-friendly and put solar panels on the dome?
I think planning regulations, building regulations are slowly changing, and not quickly enough. And I think, that certainly needs to be brought in.
Oh, but don't you find that's where the public don't quite get it? The Isle of Man can create its own laws. We can change the laws, and if Tynwald wanted to get it into its head to make solar panels mandatory, they could do it.
They could do it, yeah. And why not?
And the public will probably follow and do it if you put a discount on them or a tax break or whatever.
This is for new housing, but the problem we have is that we've got all of the housing that we're all living in unconverted, and what are we going to do about that? That's a much bigger issue, I think.
Okay, Madeline?
I want to see solar fields. A patch of land the size of a football pitch with solar panels will generate enough electricity to power 100 homes. So if you couple that with giving people grants to put solar panels on their own homes, on the roofs, and you don't leave anybody out by making them pay large amounts for this, it's a winner.
Jim Baker.
Yeah, I mean, building regs have been upgraded, and they're going to continue to be upgraded as we journey towards more carbon neutral housing. This is all part of the whole debate around power generation, and we need that holistic approach in the clear strategic plan.
Yes, I will support solar panel as long as the scheme is followed by with a scheme that is affordable for every resident.
Okay, and Alfred Cannon.
Well, it goes back to the whole climate change programme, Andy, and the need to have a proper costed roadmap. These potentially are quick wins, but they also, the impact in terms of the costs of those, how they are paid for, and if they're going to be subsidised by the taxpayer, in what circumstances they're going to be subsidised, needs to be thought through. Because if we don't put together, this is absolutely critical about the whole climate change programme, if we don't put together a roadmap for that everybody can understand in terms of the phases and where public money is going to be invested in what capacity, we're going to lose the public on this journey, and it's important that everybody is engaged and comes with us on it.
Okay, now we've come to the point in the evening where each candidate will have 1 minute to tell you why you should vote for them to be one of the 2 MHKs for Ayre and Michael. And first, Sosten Basugu.
Yes, welcome. So my name is Dr. Sos Busugu. I am coming with a new approach, that is, no one is left behind and no issue is discarded. That's the new approach I am bringing into amongst political representation. Voila.
Tim Baker.
Yeah, it's vital that the people of the Isle of Man make the right choices on the 23rd of September. We've got some difficult challenges ahead of us as we build back from COVID and we forge a new economic future in a changed international environment. I've demonstrated over the last 5 years a track record and shown what I can do on the back of my 25 years of business experience. I've got a very wide spread of experience right across government, and I've stepped up and taken on the tough stuff, stepping in where people may have stepped back due to political risk. We need people who'll roll the sleeves up and get things done. I'll hit the ground running. I'm a team player. I'm focused on improving outcomes for the people of the Isle of Man. I will put the Isle of Man first, and I will not let you down.
Alfred Cannon.
The issues facing the island are many and complex, from COVID to climate change, from housing to hospitals. We need a refreshed and renewed government to deliver solutions and better outcomes for the island. I have a 5-year track record of delivery with the nation's finances, delivery that meant consistently budgets that put people first by raising personal allowances, raising child benefit, bringing about targeted investment into public services and much more, including purchasing the steam packet. 18 months ago, I delivered a full package of support and state intervention to combat the COVID crisis. These unique packages that were delivered were based around salary support, business support schemes and the Manx Earnings Replacement Allowance, and these have helped protect and support thousands of jobs, families and businesses across the island. I have the ability and experience to tackle the big issues. I ask you to vote Cannon for a secure and sustainable future for our island home.
Philip Corkill is standing but has chosen not to take part in tonight's debate. So, alphabetically, Tim Johnston.
Since early June, I have travelled around Ayre and Michael to talk to as many of you as I can and listen to your feedback and concerns. In an isolated constituency like Ayre and Michael, you want a visible, accountable MHK working hard for you. I want to do my part in ensuring that government works for you, not for itself. A government that regains your trust by being open, transparent and accountable. The new administration must provide clear political leadership and set out a comprehensive joined-up economic plan as soon as possible to take us towards a post-COVID recovery and face the big issues like housing, health and infrastructure. I will question and scrutinise on your behalf and I will not forget my responsibilities to you as your MHK.
Duncan Livingston.
I like to think that I have common sense. I'm honest, I'm open, I listen to what people say. I care passionately about the Isle of Man and the north of the island in particular. If you vote for me, I will do the best that I can. I will listen to what you have to say and I will take advice where I need to take advice. What I would say though is please use your vote. Don't waste it. Make sure you vote for the candidate who you think is going to do the best for the Isle of Man. Thank you.
Paul Weatherall.
I've got the energy and the commitment to work in your best interests alongside whoever else is elected with me if I'm successful on September the 23rd. I hope you will read my manifesto. It's got a whole raft of policy discussions and ideas in, and then you will consider me to give me one of your votes. Together, I really believe we can make a difference in Ayre and Michael. Thank you.
Madeline Westall.
I want to stand because I want to be as an MHK who acts to scrutinise government bills and government spending and stop the waste that is going on in wasting taxpayers' money. I believe I'm the right person because I have experience. I have been a local commissioner both in Macclesfield and now in Lezayre. I'm committed to the island, I'm committed to rural life, I'm committed to speaking up for the people of Ayre and Michael. And whether it be housing or not being able to get access to a GP, not being able to get hold of a bus at any time of day, those are the things that are important, and I want to make sure that this island moves forward sustainably and also economically, powerfully into the next decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the candidates for Ayre and Michael. I just want to remind you that there are what used to be called requisition meetings, but now organised by the government. Last night, of course, there was one at Andrews Primary School. Next Tuesday, the 7th, it's at Jerby Primary School. Thursday, the 9th, at Belaf Parish Hall. Wednesday, the 13th, at Sulby Primary School. On Thursday, the 16th, it's at Michael Primary School. And Monday, the 20th of September, the Bride Methodist Church Hall, holding those meetings. So I urge you to go to those, to engage with your prospective MHKs and to quiz them about what it is that you want from them and how they can connect with you. Because the Isle of Man, well, it's been said tonight, maybe the Isle of Man has too much politics, too many politicians, but I don't see any slackening off in attention for our Keys general election, which will be 3 weeks tonight. Now, we're going to be out and about fairly shortly, ladies and gentlemen, because Manx Radio all next week, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be live for Douglas East. Next Monday, we'll be at Jack's Bar and Steakhouse. On Tuesday, for Douglas North at UCM on Homefield Road. For Douglas South on the 8th at the Pinewood Community Hub in Pulrose. On the 9th for Garth, we'll be at the Shore in Laxey. Friday the 10th, a week tomorrow, for Glenfaber and Peel at Peel Golf Club. Monday the 13th at the Mitre in Ramsey with the many candidates for Ramsey. On the 15th we'll be at Douglas Rugby Club for Middle, and then on the 16th at Ocean Views in Onchan Park for Onchan. Monday the 20th we'll be at the Bay in Port Erin for Rushen, and finally on the 21st, 2 days before the election, we'll be at Seven Kingdoms for Douglas Central. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to be with you tonight. I want to thank everybody who's been with us. Beth Espy is with me. Beth, what do you think of tonight's performance?
I think it just shows how much people really care about their constituency. We've got a room full of people here. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions, but everybody really seems to have a focus on this election. I know it's been mentioned about people using their vote. Obviously, today was the last day to register to vote, so I think
too late now if you haven't done it.
It is too late, but what we haven't talked about is young voters, and I don't know whether any of the candidates have been speaking to the young voters on the doorstep. There's a real feeling that young voters hold the key in many of these constituencies, and in some places really can change the outcome.
Well, it will be interesting to see. You know, we take the man in line out to the schools, and all. If anybody wants a bit of a laugh, but it is serious in the end, go to manxradio.com and look when we sent Elliot Turner out to Strand Street on a rainy Friday night, what the people on Strand Street thought of politicians and whether they thought they were going to vote. Now, you could say that's funny, but everybody has to vote because democracy is like a machine, it's like a muscle. And we all know your personal trainers, and I know Ben Sowery, the guy in charge of the Ginger Hall, has got a very strict personal trainer. I can tell by the shape of them. Any personal trainer will say, you use a muscle or you lose it. All I'll say to you is, democracy is a muscle. And unless we use it and unless we participate, you will not get the most out of it. And if you don't vote, you can't moan. And I'll be saying that to everyone on the man in line. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the candidates for coming here tonight. For some, it's been hell on earth. Others know exactly what they're doing. But we really appreciate your time here tonight at Ginger Hall in Sulby.